Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I want to welcome you to the second open forum on Dartmouth's financials. I'm Tracy Nordberg. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer for the college. And I want to tell you a little bit about what you'll be hearing at the forum today. We will have a presentation both by President Jim Yong Kim and by Carrie Pelzel, our Vice President for Development. And following that, we'll have a panel where they will be joined by Acting Provost and Dean of the Faculty Carol Folt, Sylvia Spears, Acting Dean of the College, and by Steve Kadish, Senior Vice President. And then after the presentation, we'll take questions from the panel, and there are cards available. The folks who have the cards, can you raise your hands, or you'll be on the sides at that point? Okay, great. And you're welcome to come to the microphones, pass those cards, or come to the microphones. The session is being broadcast live. It's on the web. It will also be archived and available in the future. There is media present. I just want to make sure you're aware of that. And we have a couple of ways for people to ask questions. For those of you who are here in Alumni Hall, you can go to the microphones on the left and the right side of the room. Again, you can fill out the cards. If you've joined us in Call Us Common Ground, there are computers in the back of the room where you can send in your questions. And for those of you at your desks or using your handhelds, you can send your questions to, I'll make sure I have it absolutely correct, budgetquestions@dartmouth.edu. I also want to let you know that we have other senior leaders here in the front to answer questions when we get to that portion of the program. Of course, we may not be able to get to all the questions that you have, so you can continue to go to the website, the budget website, on the Dartmouth webpage, and please continue to send in your questions and comments. And with that, let me introduce you to President Kim.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. We committed to the entire community when we started this process that we would give you periodic updates, and we thought that this was a very good time to do it. There's a lot of decisions about actual numbers and very specific actions that we just haven't made yet. We're going to have to go through a process that is in line with the governance of this institution, meaning that some of the numbers that we've been working on, we have to present first to faculty committees, student committees, other committees, and in that process, members of the staff and others will have a chance to input through their own division leaders and through various other mechanisms. But at the end of the day, what we have to do is come up with our own sense of what the numbers might look like and then present them to the Board of Trustees in February. So today we're going to give you a few updates, but also try to clarify some misunderstandings that are out there. And I know that this is a very difficult process. I know that this is stressful for so many of us. It's stressful for all of us in the senior leadership who are trying to make sense of how to close a $100 million structural gap. But I would just first say that I really am very grateful for the fantastic work that's being done by so many in the community. People have been working very, very hard to try to find ways of narrowing the budget gap and doing it in the most humane way that's in keeping with the values and commitments that we hold as a community. It's not an easy process. There are lots and lots of complex factors. So we'll try to take you through some of them today, and then also just really address the questions that you have. Also, many of you noticed that there were people out front protesting it. Let me just say that I think that it's fantastic that we live in a country where people can make their views known just like that. There are many countries, many places in the world, and I've worked in some of them, where it's not possible to do that. And the last time I was on a picket line, I was protesting the way that certain banks dealt with Haiti, of all things, in the news today. So it is an absolutely legitimate way of communicating with each other, and we continue to want to have deep and meaningful discussions with the SEIU and with everybody here. So one of the major questions that keep coming up, and it's understandable to me why there would be a confusion. Some people are saying, look, you just raised $1.3 billion for the endowment. doesn't that take care of the problem? So I have asked Carrie Pelzel, our Vice President for Development, to explain to you exactly what happened in the process. You know, it is a great accomplishment that we got there. It's a testament to the loyalty of donors to Dartmouth College. But there are many, many complexities as to how we got that money, and it is not going to help us solve the $100 million structural gap. And so, Carrie, if you could come up and take us through the details of the campaign, and then I'll continue after that. Thanks,
okay.
Carrie.
Thank you, Jim. Let me take you back. July 2002 was the beginning of the campaign for the Dartmouth experience. A goal was set of $1.3 billion, and the timeline was to try and meet that goal by December 31, 2009. As Jim said, certainly that is a wonderful accomplishment. It's a testament to 65,000 alumni, parents, foundations, corporations, members of our own community, that they met that goal. And that's wonderful. And I just want to say that during the course of that campaign, our alumni and other donors so enjoyed the opportunity to come to know students, to come to know faculty. And it really is a tribute to you and your work and to our staff and to our program leaders throughout the institution, that it's a tribute to you that they stepped up. In the beginning of the campaign, we were in a recession. Little did we know that we would end the campaign in an even worse recession. And so thankfully, we did hit the goal, and we did hit it on time. But as President Kim said, certainly it now raises the question. You have raised $1.3 billion. Doesn't that help with the structural problem? And so let me take us through that. Typically, contributors give to our priorities, our objectives, and they give in one of three ways. They give to help improve facilities, the landscape, where students and faculty live and work. Secondly, they give to support the ongoing enterprise. Many 65,000 donors will make annual gifts to keep the Dartmouth experience going, and that's all aspects of the experience, including financial aid. And the third way that they give is they invest in the endowment, and they create funds that support specific activities within the enterprise. And they expect that we will use the income from those funds forever to support those enterprises. So those are the three ways. So let's take a look then at the first way that people give, which is to facilities. Again, going back to the beginning of the campaign, an assessment was made of the need to improve academic facilities, living facilities, arts facilities, athletic facilities, and an agenda was established. And so we set out and asked our donors if they would help accomplish that agenda, and they largely have, by helping us to construct 18 new facilities that are supporting our students and our faculty. That money has been spent, invested in the landscape, the place of Dartmouth. The second way I mentioned that people give is through annual gifts that support our ongoing operations. In a given year, typically 10% of our operating budget is covered through gifts. And so these gifts came in during the campaign, and each and every year they were spent on important aspects of the student experience. So now that we get to the end, those gifts, too, are gone. They've been spent over the course of time. And the third way that I mentioned is through gifts to the endowment. Donors have established family funds, and sometimes they might go to, for example, financial aid to provide scholarships to our students. During the course of the campaign, 35 new professorships were established across the institution. And this includes all of our professional schools as well. And you can see a list of other areas. Those are just examples. That's not comprehensive. But those are examples of areas in which donors have invested their funds. Now, because of the dramatic downturn in the economy and our endowment, some of those funds that our donors gave are not yet at a point where they can distribute income. So that's an additional burden that, of course, we never anticipated when we launched the campaign. When the market comes back, over time, those funds will distribute and support all these activities. So donors designated their gifts for things that we said to them were critically important to the quality of the student experience. So the $1.3 billion has either been spent or clearly designated on critical activities. So that naturally leads people to say, well, okay, Carrie, if that's the case, then what are you and the development team going to do now to help us through this financial crisis? And clearly, President Kim has charged us, now that we are out of the campaign, to work very hard to grow annual giving. That's that Dartmouth College Fund, to grow annual giving as aggressively as we possibly can. This chart shows the growth in annual giving. This is just to the college, not the professional schools, since '98. And our donors have stepped up to the call. And you see we raised the giving to $20 million, then $30 million, and then up to $40 million. And we will keep on that path. And our goal is to try and increase annual giving at least at a 10% rate. Again, in this economy, that will be challenging. Our donors have been severely affected by this downturn too. But they understand this is a time of need for Dartmouth, and so we're partnering with them to try and increase that critical source of revenue. We will continue to raise money for unmet campaign needs. We hit the $1.3 billion target, but as often the case, not every single bucket in the campaign was filled. We will continue on that path to try and meet the needs that have been articulated by our faculty and our administration. And as we move along, there will be new strategic objectives. As President Kim has said, once we correct for this structural deficit, we will grow and we will invest. And I believe our donors will join us in that process and will be excited to take Dartmouth to the next level once we work through what is admittedly a very difficult time. So I'm going to stop there. I'll be prepared later to answer any questions that you may have, but I'll turn it back to President Kim.
Great. Thanks, Carrie. So let me go through a quick review. Some of this you've heard before, but I think it's worthwhile to continue to outline our approach. So there are some values and some strategic guidelines that determine what we're doing. So we have to restructure now. Let me repeat this point. So if you want to think about it simplistically, we lost about $1 billion of value in the endowment. Since that generates about 5% income for us a year, that's $50 million. We are going from over 7% spending on our endowment down closer to 5%. Two percentage points of the remaining amount in the endowment is another $50 million. That's the structural deficit. Now, there are people who think, well, can't you just solve that? Remember that that is a deficit that recurs every single year unless we address it. So we've got to do it. We've got to do it now. And the sooner we do it, the quicker we can get to growth. Remember, I've said this again and again and again, that in talking to so many of the donors that help us reach the $1.3 billion, they have gone through upheavals in their own lives. They've had to close plants. They've had to close companies. They've had to themselves readjust their thinking because of their loss of value. And they're looking to us and saying, we know you've lost all that value in your endowment. What are you doing to address the issue? Once we address the issue, my conviction and my expectation is that our donors will come back and help us. But they're waiting for us to take the steps we need to take in order to address the structural gap. We're placing everything on the table, and we're being strategic rather than across the board. We are going to have to grow in some areas. We're going to have to get smaller in other areas. And that's the conversation that's happening right now. And it's been a great conversation. It's been a conversation where people have said, you know, we can do this differently. There have been other conversations where people say, you know, you cannot cut this because it's too vital. It's a lively and important conversation, and we'll continue to have it. We think that we can both reduce the cost of operating Dartmouth College while at the same time improving the quality of what we do. You know, there aren't very many areas where this notion that you hear in business all the time, quality is free. There are very few places where that's really, really true. One of my experiences has been that in medicine that seems to be true. And I think also we can make the point that in higher education, that if we do things more effectively and more efficiently, we can actually increase the quality of our services and what we do. We're going to seek new revenue sources, solicit innovative ideas. You know, I talk often, and it comes out a lot about my interest in starting an Institute for Healthcare Delivery Science. And the reason I keep talking about it is because this is one area where we have a chance to bring in new funds from the outside. I'm not talking about taking precious Dartmouth College Fund unrestricted dollars and putting it into that, because we don't need to. It's the hottest issue right now in the United States, and the kinds of thinking and research and teaching that the world needs, that the U.S. government needs, is precisely what we can offer. So we have to be opportunistic, find those new sources of revenue, and bring in new money to Dartmouth College. My hope is that whatever layoffs occur, because we're going to get on the path to growth as soon as possible, people will be hired back and will be simply doing other things. We've already seen that to an extent from the layoffs from last year, and I'm even more optimistic that we can get on the path of growth quickly. We have to plan for the next 5 years, and we have to be aspirational. You know, while our supporters on the one hand want to see us making the kinds of cuts that they've had to themselves and that is just dictated by the structural gap we have, they're also waiting to be inspired. They want to have a sense that despite these budget problems, we have a bold and exciting vision for the Dartmouth of the future. And from what I'm hearing from people in our community, I was just at the Dartmouth Centers Forum group where I met with people who are running the HOP and the Hood and the Center for the Humanities, and just wonderful institutions that have themselves a bold vision for what we can do as an entire campus to tackle some of the most important issues of our day. We are a fantastically strong institution, and I think we will be able to inspire our donors to be even more generous going forward. We are very committed to be open and respectful and to have constructive debate. I think that, in fact, the protest outside today is an indication that everyone has a huge stake in this problem, in fixing this problem of the gap. But we're constantly in communication and are committed to continuing it. We will tell you what we can tell you as soon as we can tell it to you, and that is in line with the governance structures of this institution. When we have a number that we can share, we will share it with you. Just to take you through it and to make the point again, this is what our budget's going to look like on top, and those are the deficits. Now, someone asked me recently, why don't you just get one of your billionaire donors to give you $100 million? And wouldn't that solve the problem? And the point is, it would solve the problem for this year. But then, excuse me, I'm not supposed to be in front. It would solve the problem for this year, But then we'd have to get it again and again and again. In other words, it's a structural problem. It keeps recurring unless we reduce expenditures or have new sources of revenue. So it wouldn't be a gift of 100 million we're looking for. It would be a gift of 2 billion we're looking for. If someone's willing to give us $2 billion that will generate 100 million a year, then we're okay. And if any of you know who that might be, let me know, right? Moreover, what Carrie has said is that people don't like to give you money to make up a structural gap in your budget. They like to give money for things like the Visual Arts Center. They like to give money for things like golf practice areas, where they give you very clearly restricted donations to say, use the money for this or we won't give you the money. We have people coming and saying that to us all the time. And in those situations, we usually say yes, because it helps us build the Dartmouth experience. We'd love it if they would say, hey, unrestricted, use it to fill the budget gap. But many donors don't do that. Now, those are the donors, those very donors are the ones who've built Dartmouth College for us. So we're so grateful when people come and say, we think you need a visual arts center. That's great. We're so grateful to them. And for people who give us for athletic facilities, these are wonderful supporters of Dartmouth. But we just have to understand that I can't then turn around and say, no, give it to me for this. It doesn't work that way, I have found. So we've got to get to a place where revenues and expenses are in line. That's what we've been told to do by the Board of Trustees. And it's a basic business principle. And it's made even more difficult by the fact that the economic model for a college education at places like Dartmouth is unlike most other businesses. If you add up all our expenses and divide it by the number of students we have, you get a number about that's around $100,000, right? So it costs us about $100,000 a year to educate a single student. But for those who are full-pay students who don't get financial aid, they pay about $50,000. And for those who are on larger scholarships, they pay less. So we, as an institution, provide subventions to every student. One person in a meeting that I was at said, well, what do we say to the parents who pay full price and the fact that they're subsidizing the parents who don't pay full price? And Rick Levin, the president of Yale, said immediately, no, that's not how it works. We subvention everybody. We give support to everybody. Even the ones who pay quote-unquote full price are really only paying half the price of the education. Now, we believe in the Dartmouth model. We believe that the liberal arts education is producing some of the greatest leaders we have ever seen and we will ever see. We believe in this model, but that's how it works, folks. It's a very difficult business model to sustain. In this particular environment, without getting our revenues and our expenses in line, we are not going to be able to sustain that model because this model depends on our donors generously giving to us to make up for that gap in what our students pay and what it costs us to run this place. So how are we going to close the gap? We've had lots of suggestions, and I'll give you more detail about them later, but we have to look at benefits and compensation. There have been a lot of great ideas coming from faculty, staff, and students. We have to reorganize and restructure. We think that we'll be able to bring about a lot of really wonderful efficiencies in building better business processes that make use of expertise that we have in our own group right now. We think that we can reduce some programs and generate revenue that way. And then also new revenues and initiatives we think are really exciting. New master's programs, increasing the size of classes, integrating more the professional schools and the undergraduate schools. We'll talk about some of the most exciting proposals in a little bit when we have our panel. Carol and Steve and Sylvia Spears know more about those details, and we'll share them with you. But let me just give you one example of how we're trying to be as creative and fiscally responsible as we possibly can. We received a gift from the class of 1953, the great, great class of 1953. And they had originally given us a pledge of $10 million to build a new dining and social facility out near the McLaughlin cluster. What we found out was that $10 million would not cover that, and that we would have to take out another loan, and it would create another burden on our budget, because we'd have to keep on paying off the loan, and we'd have to keep paying for the upkeep and maintenance of that new facility. Now, it would be great if we could have had that new facility, but we were in a bind. The class of 53 actually ended up giving us $12 million and kept coming back and asking us, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So Linda Snyder and the team in the facilities started thinking creatively. And after much discussion with members of the community, after a lot of discussion with the board, what we have decided to do, and we'll announce that later on this afternoon, is that we are going to take the $12 million and completely redo Thayer Dining Hall. And Thayer Dining Hall will be renamed the Class of 1953 Commons. Now, it turns out that we talked to the people and the family of Thayer, and they're perfectly happy with this. And so what's going to happen? We're going to be able to create more seats for dining. We're also going to create 2 new, very large social spaces, something that we've needed for the students for a very long time. And because Thayer right now is so inefficient, by putting in insulation, by replacing the systems, by doing all the things that we need to do to turn it into a state-of-the-art facility, the overall savings from the investment we make will make the building of this new 53 Commons cost neutral. $12 million, we're going to have to take out a loan to finish all of the changes that we're going to make, but the savings that we're going to get from being more efficient will pay for the loan. So it's cost neutral. In other words, it doesn't increase our budget line, and it won't make the deficit worse. The class of 53 is thrilled about this. The Thayer family is very happy that we've been able to find this new solution. We are thrilled that we're going to create these new social spaces for our students, and we think we've come up with a very creative solution that was born of the pressure to be fiscally responsible, but also meet the needs of our donors. So this is just one example, and I would say that lots of other ideas have come up that are going to allow us to do this, both reduce costs and improve the quality of the Dartmouth experience. So what's going to happen? This is a visual of the process that we're going to go to. And I don't want to take you through any of the details. I just want to say there are some differences from last year. I think last year, my understanding is that announcements were made on one day, and after one day, after the layoffs and other announcements were made, the process was over. We're doing something different. In order to get to $100 million of a structural budget gap, we're going to have to take this process over a longer period of time. Will there be layoffs announced in February? I think so. Will that be the end of it? No. There will be other announcements as we go along. But the reason it's going to take time is because we're talking about fundamental changes in the way we organize our business processes, procurement and supply chain management. There are things that are going to take time for us to get into place. So it's not going to be a one-shot deal. This is going to take us some time. But we'll know a lot more by the end of the meeting with the board. But I wouldn't expect a comprehensive plan for what's going to happen after the February board meeting. There are going to be other discussions that need to take place even after the February board meeting. Between April and the end of 2010, we're going to get a lot of this work done, and what we're going to need to do will become clearer and clearer. Now, let me just say, my hope also is that over the next year, we are going to be able to attract exciting new sources of funding for projects like healthcare delivery. And again, if you know of opportunities for us to bring in new resources for our full range of programs that we're doing here, that would be great to hear, because that's what we need to do. We need to be very, very proactive and aggressive in going out and finding those new sources of revenue. Some people have asked, what if our endowment goes up? Do we call this process off? Well, there are some encouraging signs about the endowment, but there are also signs that would suggest that we be careful. So we cannot, as I explained in my last presentation, sometimes it's hard to actually know what the value of our endowment is. For example, we hold property. About 10% of our portfolio is property. How do you know what the value of the property is if you don't sell it and if nobody's buying? Some of our funds, we go through a process at the end of every year called MarktoMarket. In other words, we get some sense of what a particular fund that we have invested in is worth at that particular moment. So when that happens, what's going to happen to the value of our endowment? I don't know. Some have suggested that after that process where we get all the valuations at the end of the year, the value of our endowment will go down. Bottom line is that our expectation is that our endowment will grow about 5% this year. Now, the endowment distribution, though, for this year, fiscal year 10, is fixed. The amount of money that's going to be distributed from the endowment was decided upon already. There's a small possibility that some of our funds that are quote-unquote underwater, valued less than they were when we bought them, might come above water and distribute a little bit. But our thinking now is that if that little bit of an increase in income covers our $2.5 million deficit for this year, we'll be very happy. Now, we should all be cheering for our endowment so that it goes up in 2011. And I think we're all hopeful that it will. But it still doesn't get us out of the fundamental issue, which is we've got to solve the structural deficit, especially if the endowment goes down again. A lot of people are saying, the loss of 85,000 jobs in December is an indication that we're going to hit the double dip and our endowment might go down again. So we cannot make any predictions right now as to what the endowment performance will be. And the bottom line is we still have to go through and fix this structural gap. So we've had a lot of input, and we've been tracking the input very carefully. These are the number of submissions and where they've come from. And here's how we have been processing them. Some of them were statements or particular things that we should do. We've done them, and they've been helpful, and they're completed. Others were referred to divisions. Others were assigned to a cross-Dartmouth project. Some are under evaluation. And 171 others were just questions and comments. And so we have a program management team led by Lisa Salone, and the team has been doing a fantastic job. So we're carefully monitoring what you tell us. And many of these ideas we hope to be able to implement. So let me finish just by saying a few things. I've learned a lot in 6 months. It's been a very, what's the right word? Very challenging 6 months. But here's what we have to do. We've got to get serious about making the kinds of reductions that we need so that we can get to the point where we can grow. Now, I think, from looking at what we've done, I think that we can get to a place where we are as efficient as any college or university has ever been. And of course, the more efficient we are, the more of our deficit we can take care of with efficiencies and not layoffs. Right? We are very, very concerned about our impact on employees and our impact on the Upper Valley. I understand many people have told us that Dartmouth College is the economic engine of the Upper Valley. But with a $100 million deficit, the engine's broken. And so we've got to fix it. Let's just fix it. Let's not bemoan the brokenness of our engine. Let's just fix it and then get on to the path of growth. Now, if some of the things that I think can happen, if some of our new programs really take off, if we start getting more funds from, for example, the federal government and other funders around healthcare, if we are able to get the kind of grants for exciting new programs in the humanities and the arts, if we're able to do that, what we're going to see is a Dartmouth that will have quickly fixed the engine and gotten on to the path of growth. And I am convinced that the interests of Dartmouth and the interests of the Upper Valley are absolutely entwined. That's why we're having this protest today, because some people wonder, are our interests entwined? I'm convinced that they are, but we are never going to get to the point of growth if we don't take this financial crisis seriously. Everyone is watching. Our alums, our donors are watching. We've got to take it seriously. I think people will be encouraged at the creativeness of some of the things that we come up with. The Class of 53 Commons is a good example. I think some people will be disappointed with the choices that we have to make. What I can promise you is that we're going to take in all the input that you give us, and then I'm going to come back and give you my rationale that's based on the decision-making that's going to take place between the Board of Trustees, our senior staff. And we'll be very clear about the rationale for why we've done what we've done. Not everyone's going to be happy with it. Unfortunately, tough decisions will have to be made. But if we do it quickly, if we do it in a spirit of cooperation, we will get on the path of growth. So let me end with first an invitation. This is Martin Luther King weekend coming up. We have a series of really wonderful celebrations. And many of you know that I have been involved in Haiti for a very long time. And I have to tell you, my own work has been focused on the slums of Lima, Peru, the prisons of Siberia, countries like Lesotho and Rwanda in Africa that have rates of HIV infection approaching 30% of the adult population. These are not the normal vacation spots that people go to. These are tough places. But I've never seen anything as heart-wrenching as what's happening in Haiti right now. If there was one country in the world that cannot afford an earthquake, it's Haiti. So through the generosity of volunteers and donors, and taking absolutely not a dollar from anything that might help us solve the budget cap that we have, we're mounting what is, for me, a really encouraging response. We hope to have a team of physicians on their way to Haiti as soon as tomorrow morning. And we're getting messages from Partners in Health, the organization that I helped to found 20 years ago, saying so many things are broken. Is there any way you can get some orthopedic surgeons and nurses and others and supplies down here? Because literally between now and the next few days, many tens of thousands of lives are in the balance. And so donations from the community and donations from some of our leaders have allowed us to mount a response. Now, I say that to make a final point. That's the kind of work I have been spending 20 years of my life doing. I don't see the process of getting us through the budget crisis as different from that work before. I am doing my utmost to bring the same values. We have to be fair. We have to be compassionate to those who may lose their jobs. We have to do this in a way that's strategic, that will get us to the point where we can employ even more people and be an even more vibrant community. The values of compassion and fairness have to guide us through this process, and I give you my word that I will do the utmost to bring those values to this process to you, and at the same time tell you everything we can tell you as soon as we can tell it to you. So let me stop my remarks there. I thank you for your attention, and Steve and Sylvia and Carol, join me up here, and we're open for your questions. Thank you. So we have lots of ways for you to ask questions.
Sure. Thanks, Tracy.
Me? Okay, great. This is a question from Anonymous. Thank you. it's a question about shifting the fall term to begin early in September and end before Thanksgiving. And I'm glad that that came up because we've had so many suggestions about the academic calendar. I think there have been at least 24 that were very specific about the calendar, and I'd probably say there's got to be another 50 that have talked about things that we could do during the summer and things that we could do during the winter break, or the break that would happen between Thanksgiving and the start of classes in January. So let me just give you a little background on this, because I think it's something that could be very exciting for Dartmouth, but it's actually very complicated. The idea for the academic calendar, changing it, has been around in the faculty for many years. I think the first time I remember reading about it was more than 15 years ago in minutes from a faculty meeting where they said, why don't we end the academic calendar at the beginning of Thanksgiving? Because people have thought about it for a number of different reasons over time. It started coming back again in the last year and a half from students who were saying, if we had a longer break, we could go close some of the dorms in the winter, we could become much more sustainable, we could reduce our energy costs. There were a lot of things like that. It also came up when they were talking about our footprint, people leaving at the holiday, flying many miles, coming back, and then during the economic downturn, many people's families found those extra trips home to be quite expensive. So I just put that out there to say that these ideas have been around for a long time. Many people have been thinking about it. There's actually a lot of incredibly good work to sort of say who's affected by a change in the calendar, and what would that, how would that alter the way we clean the dorms, the way we do our reunions, the way we do the DOC trips, the way we do our final exams, things like that. So people have been working on this for quite a while. I think there's a pretty good idea of where the real points of community interest will be and where the things that are that we can do pretty easily. And it looks like we might be able to do something like this if we really talked about it. But I also have to mention that the calendar is owned by the faculty. It would require a vote of the faculty to change the academic calendar. The registrar actually sets the dates, but we have a very strong process, so we've already started that committee work, and we'll be thinking about that and trying to bring people in to talk about it. But the other exciting initiatives that go with it would, in many ways, be the revenue generators for the institution. It might be different things that we do in the summer to expand programs. The calendar would allow transfer students to come from semester schools. It might alter the way we could interface with developing our own ideas for that interim break and so on. So there's a lot of work to be done, but this is one that could be a win in many facets of the institution.
I'd just add that as acting dean of the college, it's incredibly important for all of us who are working on looking at things like a potential change to the academic calendar, that we also have a sense from our student community, what would it mean to you? How would it affect your life? Is it good news or bad news for you? How does it affect your finances and your families and your ability to come and go? So we look forward to having some opportunities in the very near future to speak with students exactly about those kinds of issues and what would it mean? How would a change to the academic calendar affect student experience at Dartmouth? Here's a question.
These are three benefit questions.
It's a perfect lead, I have to tell you. Is there a student budget forum next week? And the good news is yes. We have been working with the Student Budget Advisory Committee, which this year is functioning in an expanded forum. It includes a number of at-large members as well as representatives of Student Assembly, Undergraduate Finance Committee, Intercommunity Council, Paleopolis, and class councils. We felt it was very important for us to both have the wisdom and knowledge of individual students in our process, but as well have some network for communication to students so we could get information back and forth to the student community. We have been spending some time in the past 2 weeks actually outlining a student budget forum which will take place next Tuesday, January 19th, 6 p.m., College Common Ground. It will be co-sponsored by the Student Budget Advisory Committee and the administration, and Vice President Kadish, Provost Folt, and myself will be in attendance. We'll also have some co-moderators from the Student Budget Advisory Committee. So there will be more information coming out after this session about the specifics of next week's discussion. And as usual, students' favorite place to gather is in College Common Ground. And there we hope to also find some common ground in our discussion about what's in the best interest of students' lives at Dartmouth.
Are there any direct questions from the audience? Please, we have our microphone set up. So there have been a bunch of questions about human resource related issues, layoffs, benefits, and so Tracy, you've got 3 of them. Maybe you want to just take some of the issues. And
sure. There were a couple of questions about the retirement incentive and reductions in hours. One was that the incentive offered last year was 6 months pay, and it was a good start, but the suggestion was to increase it to be more in line with the layoff policy and that we would get a better response. So good timing. I'm pleased to announce 2 things. For those of you who aren't familiar with the package that was offered for retirees, again, for people who are 55 years of age and at least 10 years of service to the college, we did increase the package to 9 months that was offered. And as I left my office today, we were at 60 commitments and counting. And that surely makes a very big difference as we are continuing to look at the type of decisions we need to make in the departments. We have 60 people who have come forward with a commitment to retire. The next question was about reduced days and hours. I believe there are people who would be willing to take a reduction in their working time to offset permanent layoffs. Summers are short, and with families, there are those who might be willing to have more time off, even without pay. I suggest it as an option. We actually heard this suggestion many, many times on the web page. I know you saw the categories up there, but we did hear about having a closing, an extended closing at winter break or at other times, maybe things that fit within a particular department. So that is something we're considering. I really encourage you, if you have opinions or comments about that, pros and cons, to please, you could email me. You can put them on the budget website anonymously if you'd like. But I think as we talked about the impact on students on some of the academic calendars, this impacts you, and I would love to know how you think it could work and to get more of your suggestions on that. And I think the other one was also about hours reductions. So I'll add one last piece on that. There were people who came forward and said that the retirement option wasn't viable for them. They weren't old enough or they hadn't been here long enough, but they did think there was something that they might want to do. So we offered what we called the staff options, and that is that you could come forward and say, I think my position could be eliminated, or I have a set of circumstances in my life that would allow me to take a layoff. And certainly we don't have a large number coming forward, but I think we have at least a dozen people who have come forward with some pretty creative proposals of how that would work for them and their department. And in addition to that, reductions in their schedule, either by the week or by the year. And so we're taking those into consideration and really appreciate people's willingness to come forward with those creative proposals.
Thanks, Tracy. We have a question. Yes.
Hi. Hello. Oh, hello. There it is. Thank you for continuing the conversation. I had a question about some language that was used when talking about the endowment, which was the mark-to-market theory. And I might be making a very naive connection, but my crude understanding of that was a chief tenet of the Enron Corporation, and how they figured out their market, how they figured out their values. And so if someone could explain to me what the difference between the way they used it and the way we're using it would greatly relieve my mind. Because when that language was used, I was like, wait a minute, I've heard that before. And in a very different context.
Q?
Oh, yeah.
Mike.
Enron is unfortunately not a good example because they were hiding things. And in fact, we are trying to do our best to understand exactly what the mark-to-market is. And so, for instance, for some of our illiquid securities, what we're doing is comparables against other things that might have sold, against other funds, and it's all very open. And in fact, your example is good because there's a thing called FASB 157. This is Financial Accounting Standards Board number 157, which gives you a whole protocol for how you value illiquid investments or investments that are hard to value. Unfortunately, Enron was trying to hide. They were cheating. They were breaking the law. That's the reason why Skilling went to jail. We're not comparable.
In fact, let me say, as far as we know, still, I'm the only college or university president to actually take the entire community through our investment portfolio. So I promise you that we will continue to be very, very transparent. And the bottom line is, over the last 10 years, Q and the team at the investment office have done extremely well. We're 8% up, whereas almost everyone else is either flat or down. So I mean, the regular stock index is flat. So we've done well. We hope to do even better. And as the endowment comes back, if it does, we'll keep telling you exactly what it's worth and what we can expect from it. Carol? Yeah.
I've got one here. It says, I cringe when I write this, but yes, charge more for parking. Yikes. But I want to say two things about this one. And of course, we are going to look into parking, and that is something that we haven't really changed the cost of parking for a very long time. We've been trying to make really important investments in making it easier for people to commute, to help support the whole transportation system of the Upper Valley. These are things that the institution's been very committed to. There have also been great ideas about getting bike programs going so that people can ride bikes, zip bikes, zip cars. The innovation in the community in areas like transportation, energy savings, even parking is actually quite exciting. I think it is something that we could look at, though, for a potential revenue generation, so we'll be talking to people about that. But the other thing about this point is that people have been amazingly strong in offering up ways that would, in fact, potentially affect their pocketbook, but that they could see might really help the institution find something that could help. And I don't think there's an idea that we will eventually adopt that hasn't been suggested by somebody in the community, and I think that's been really characteristic. So the anonymous person that sent that in, thank you. I hope we can do it in a way that will be helpful to the community there.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Hello? Is it here yet? Okay. Yes. I hope that this is not too specific a question, but I was just wondering if beyond the potential or likelihood of layoffs, if you're at liberty to discuss any changes to benefits going forward that are under consideration, that are looking especially likely. Thank you.
I was asked to answer that question. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, the college has a benefits council that has members from all over the college, both hourly, salaried, and faculty members who participate in a process to make recommendations on benefits. They are already deep and underway in reviewing our benefits plans, looking at them in comparison to our peers and other organizations, both in the region and nationally. I think they are looking at multiple ways to find reasonable changes to our benefits that we can both tolerate and that keep us competitive. And those come in two categories. Without going into too much detail, because I think you would really need more time on the information, there are two ways that we have costs in our benefits plan. One is the premium, and that is what you pay in your paycheck each week or each month, the amount that you and the college share in paying the insurance premium. So that's one place we can look at. The second is how we pay for the health care that we use. So some of us are very healthy and don't use a lot of health care. Others are moderate users. We need to pay copays when we go to the doctor. We need to buy prescriptions, and we have a copay system for that. Others have more intense use of the health plan through procedures or surgeries or hospitalization. And so we're looking at the ways that the plan is designed and the cost that you would pay for those different levels of care. I don't know if that answers your question, but it is under review. There is representation across the college giving their input on that, and we do use the consulting services of a benefits expert so that we are sure we have the most up-to-date information and options.
Yes, this one is from the room. Your budget item, fund prior deficits and outstanding commitments, is $40 million. What are these, and how many of these are to fund President Kim's projects? In taking the really hard look at our expenses this summer and through the fall, in looking and looking and looking again, we found a number of programmatic items where the commitment was made, but it wasn't clear that the actual financial source was there to match. And so these things do add up to a little more than $40 million. They're real commitments, and that what we are proposing to do is over the next 5 years is to, as that's the time frame for when these commitments were made, is to honor those commitments. And so they're real items with a real financial need that as an institution we need to honor. They're all from the past. None of them are for projects that relate to President Kim going forward.
Well, let me be even more explicit. So quite often when a new president comes in, they're given some chunk of money to start new projects. And there's not a single one of my new projects that we've started since I became president. And the reason is because we're going through a financial crisis. You know, my work has been in healthcare delivery, but I have not taken money from anything else and put it into there. What we're trying to do is to say healthcare delivery is a very specific opportunity to bring new money into Dartmouth College. So that we have not diverted a single dollar to something that I brought in as my project. My project is Dartmouth College. My project is to get us through this financial crisis and get us on the path of growth. I have to do that first and foremost. Would it be great for me to be able to have some funds at some point to be able to start new and exciting things? That would be great. But we're raising those from outside sources right now. We're not taking them from the overall budget of the college and launching something that is my pet project. Let me just be clear about that. I have not done that. And we don't have plans until we're on much firmer financial footing.
Fortunate to have the 3 professional school deans in front, and I just received a question for them. Any one of you could answer. How are Tuck, Thayer, and DMS affected by this gap?
Hi. We're affected exactly the same way in proportion to this problem. We're part of Dartmouth College. We're making cuts. We're doing all the same kinds of things that Dartmouth College is doing. And as a matter of fact, when you see the big number, it's in a consolidated number. It includes our issues too. Everyone was affected proportionally by the endowment decline. We didn't all have the same structural deficits, but the revenue side got hit the same way for everyone, so we're all responding in the same way. And it's a challenge for all of us, but we all have to do our share to make it better for everyone, and I'm confident we will. Thank you.
There was one question about, have you been to any classes this term, and can you describe your interaction with faculty? I haven't been to any this term yet. I taught a few last term, and I'm scheduled to teach a few again this term. I've had wonderful interactions with a lot of different faculty, and I have to say, having been in a medical school for so long, the interactions that have been most exciting are the ones where I get to talk about my anthropological life, and being able to sit down in a room and talk about social theory and how that might apply to higher education and our task has been great. So I'm scheduling a lot more lunches and dinners with faculty, but I have to say that it's been just one of the most exciting parts of being here, is that every part of my brain that I had ever used before, everything from studying social theory as a graduate student in anthropology to thinking about medical relief, to thinking about multiculturalism. The fact that I get to do this all the time is one of the really wonderful things about this job. So I look forward to it. Also, if you read some of the interesting articles coming out these days, there was an article just a few days ago about how business schools are trying to turn their education more into a liberal arts style education. I can tell you that our focus on building really robust departments in the humanities and the sciences, that doing it in a way that hasn't narrowly focused people down one path, and that it's really expanded their way of thinking, people are coming back to that. The rationale among the business schools was that if you're going to be successful in the business world, you have to be able to simultaneously think about multiple perspectives around a given table in different cultures. That critical thinking that you get from a liberal arts education is the most important part of being successful in anything. So I think the model that we have built here is exactly right. I think the point of it is not to make better business professionals or better physicians, but the advantage is that it actually does that too. The point of what we're doing here in taking this radical approach to a liberal arts education, I think is exactly right, and we have to build on it. Why don't I take this always fun question? When will you move into your new house? So, in 6 months, I've learned a lot about what it means to be president of a place like Dartmouth College. And, the specter of building, it's not even building, it's renovating that house, surely strikes everybody as being something to sort of raise your eyebrows at. But let me tell you where we are at that. The house renovations will be completely privately funded. Now, why would our donors completely privately fund the renovation of the President's house? Well, as I've told you before, I did not take this job because I wanted to live in a big house. I have never wanted to live in a big house. It's never been one of the goals in my life, ever. But every college or university president I've ever talked with said that the President's house is one of the most important strategic tools that you have. Inviting people into the house you live in to eat dinner, to have meetings, those things are very important. And it's very important in terms of us being able to raise the kind of funds that we need to get us to the next stage. The vast majority of the expenditures are in fixing the systems. The house was built in 1926 by Ernest Martin Hopkins for about 2/3 of what he was supposed to pay for it because he couldn't raise all the money to build the house as he wanted to. So we're dealing with 83 years of deferred maintenance. Just to clear up a couple of other things, there is going to be no swimming pool in that house. They had to dig up the backyard because every time it rained, it flooded in the basement. Right? So we had 83-year-old electrical systems with flooding in the basement. I don't want my 10-year-old and 1-year-old to be in that kind of a house, and so we had to fix those things. Another rumor I've heard, I have a putting green in the back of my house. I will not have a putting green in the back of my house. Okay? And what we're doing is 83 years of deferred maintenance so we can build a house that I will live in, into which I will invite faculty, students, staff, and our alumni and donors in order to give people the sense that Dartmouth is something that they should support. Now, I wish I didn't have to do it. I wish I didn't have to bring it up every time we have a public forum. It is not going to take money out of the budget. These are new contributions that specifically were made because the people who gave us the money understood how strategically important the President's house is. So if there are other rumors and other questions, please ask us, and I'll tell you, no swimming pool and no putting green. So let's get that on the table now. Oh, and we're going to move into our new house probably the 3rd week of February.
Okay, we've got a couple here. I'm going to start with one. Steve and I will take this one. It said, can we talk about the process that we're leading and how many people are involved directly in the budget committee and other working groups? And so just want to reiterate a little bit about what Jim was describing when he talked about the process. Looking at these, I have to use my hands to talk about these cross-institutional things that we're looking at the way we do IT, the way we might look at our financial systems, the way we look at our procurement, the way we look at communications. These are things that we do in many different ways across the institution, and we're looking for ways to unite those activities, get the good ideas from every area, bring them together, and be able to meet our goals by looking across different areas. We call them the cross-cutting projects, and those bring in people from across the institution. So in constructing the budget committee, we knew from the start we needed to have the leaders from all of the parts of the college at part of that budget committee. So we have the deans of all the professional schools. We have the leaders of the major areas all at that budget committee. We have 9 faculty on that budget committee. We have the head of HR. We have all of us sitting up here on that. And those are the people that talk all the time about these cross-institutional projects. Then when we go into particular areas and we ask the dean of the faculty, or we say to the libraries, or we talk to particular areas, we deal very directly with those leaders of those areas to get their feedback on how best to do these in such a way that they can maintain their high quality aspirations and still meet the needs that are of this $100 million reduction in expenses. Now, when we do that, we also have advisory groups for each of those areas. So there's a council on libraries. There's a faculty group that advises decal. There is a faculty or a mix of faculty and staff that advises virtually every entity in the college. They're also participating in those discussions. And then you go into the student area, and I think Dean Spears just talked about the way you bring the whole student budget advisory committee into those kinds of conversations. So in many ways, we've been trying to take advantage of the natural leadership, in addition taking advantage of the natural governance of the faculty. So in that case, we go to the standing committees of the faculty. So when we talk about things like changes in the calendar, we go to the Committee on Instruction. When we talk about financial priorities that involve not just arts and sciences, but the whole college, we are defined in the OFDC to go to the Committee on Priorities. When we want to talk to the faculty, this is in arts and sciences, and there'd be different ones that would be happening in the professional schools. When we want to talk at the level of the department, we go to the Committee on Chairs, give the chairs the information, and go back and forth. And then we also talk about it in a faculty meeting. So the next faculty meeting will be given over to it. So it's a pretty broad attempt to use your pre-existing structures and leadership, but try to get it going down as far as you can to every individual to get feedback that has a natural conduit to come back up to that budget committee. Steve, do you
just want to add 2 things. I've read it's over 1,000 comments now. And I'm blown away by the creativity and the seriousness of the comments. And in some cases, the level of detail of thought that has gone into the comments. And those are being funneled to the right places, either the projects that Carol referred to, or they're being directed directly to the division leaders. But keep them coming. I mean, there was an unbelievable flood of these comments right before the break, but there's been another 300 or 400 of them since, and even 100, over the last week. We're still looking at them, and they're still incredibly meaningful. The second point I want to make is that new guy, been here maybe 6 months and 2 weeks, a couple weeks longer than the president. But the program management team and the work that I've been able to do with each of the division leaders and the faculty that I've met, I have been incredibly impressed with the ability, capability, wisdom, and ability to get things done. And it just gives me this unbelievable confidence in terms of the ability and the wisdom and the intention to actually move through and get through this. And before I flip it to somebody else to ask a question, I hope that you will ask your best roomers to us, because this is a great opportunity to have you all ask, what a roomer, call it a question, and then we can answer.
I'd like to add just one invitation, put out one invitation to students. One of the observations that I've had recently as we looked at the feedback coming in from the community, as of January 10th, about 50 students had submitted a suggestion or a comment. It is vitally important. So this is a call to students who are watching by DAR TV or will view this on YouTube later today or over the weekend. It is so incredibly important that we have your ideas, your suggestions, your creativity, your innovation as we think about the budget process. So I'm hopeful that students, now that they've settled into the winter term, will begin to take a little bit of time to check out the budget website and be informed. Come to the forum next Tuesday. Submit ideas and suggestions. It's essential. As Dean of the College, I need to know the kinds of things that you're thinking and that you're concerned about. So those students who are in the room, I am officially charging you to go out and start talking to other students, to be engaged in the process as much as you possibly can while keeping your eye on your academic lives.
Related to that, we have a question about why is the faculty being shielded from the cuts? So I want to talk a little bit about that, and it also relates to something that Sylvia was just saying. We're also getting lots of comments that have to do with ways we do our academic programs, and they can go from everything about a course that they think should be eliminated or a whole department that they think should be doubled in size. I mean, it runs the gamut. And there are so many suggestions coming in about things like that, that what we really need to say is that we need to do some things in a very different time frame than others. So we're going to make thoughtful discussions with the faculty and with students about strategic planning going forward, and that's where you start talking about your academic programs and the institution that you want to be in the future. It's in that process that you look at curricular changes. I mean, the curriculum changes all the time, but the faculty frequently wants to sit back down and say, okay, let's look at our distributive requirements. Let's really understand what the needs are of our students in the future. Those things will be coming through in a different process, even though we're getting lots of suggestions of them. They're not really the way, we don't look at them as being things that you decide by a revenue model. We decide those by a thoughtful, constructive, aspirational model for providing the best education that we can. When you talk about why is the faculty being shielded from cuts, what we said in the past was that we don't anticipating reducing the number of faculty. I've said a number of times that we've worked for 10 years to get a faculty of the size that we have now, and have a faculty that has reached a compensation level that makes them very competitive within our peers in the Ivy, and we're deeply committed to the progress that we've made as an institution to get to that point. But the faculty, the arts and sciences, will certainly be facing cuts, and we've already been talking in great detail with the faculty on a number of committees about the types of things that they too will see altering their budget, but wanting to do it in a thoughtful way that is not going to be having a negative impact on our competitiveness, our recruitment and retention of faculty, and the outstanding academic programs that we offer. So I think it's important to realize that that's also part of the conversation. Oh, should we talk about enrollment?
Yes, yes.
Oh, someone at...
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, is it on?
Yep.
So you just talked about recruiting and retaining a tremendous faculty that are talented, and I read an op-ed today in the Dartmouth, which a lot of students don't read, but a lot of faculty and staff do, that talked about a staff member that stimulated a student intellectually beyond the classroom. How do we plan to keep recruiting and retaining staff that do the same thing our faculty do? Research, they do assessment, they do just amazing work that helps the faculty and supports the faculty's mission.
I didn't quite understand that.
Well, the question is really, if we're interested in the recruitment and retention of outstanding faculty, are we also interested in the recruitment and retention of outstanding staff?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so when you talk about that, when we do recruitment for staff, in the same way that when we recruit for faculty, we try to be competitive in the market. So we don't go out and try to hire a position. Not all of our positions in staff are national searches, but some of them are. In those cases, we're trying to be competitive. We don't go in to a process of hiring someone that we don't intend to get the very best person in that position and give them a competitive package. What we're talking about now is maybe searching for fewer positions, but when you search for a position, you're still bringing in those outstanding people and doing everything possible to retain them. So I think the principles are the same. And the goal is the same because I think we all realize that it's the excellence of all of the people in that enterprise that keeps us going forward. The faculty just tend to be 100% from a national or international market, and they have a different timing, so we have different ways that we deal with each of those groups, but we have a shared goal in respecting and looking for the best.
I have also recognized that when you have really talented people, whether staff or faculty, there are other institutions who want them. And it is certainly all of in our greatest best interest to retain all of the strength and talent that we have at Dartmouth. And so that's part of my commitment because I think it has an incredible impact on the student experience both inside the classroom and outside of the classroom.
So here's a rumor. Here's a rumor I heard today. Are you going to purchase a house in Norwich that does have a swimming pool? What do you think the answer to that is? Well, first of all, if I had a summer home, I don't think it's very strategic to have it in Norwich, right? I don't have a summer home, and I don't plan to purchase a house with a swimming pool in Norwich. But I like Norwich. Norwich is great. I love Norwich. Okay.
There's some great swimming pools for kids in the Upper Valley, too.
That's right.
With wonderful people who teach them how to swim.
Yep.
Here's one. Do committees vote, or are they sounding boards? And there's a bit of both. There are places where they're sounding boards, and there are places where they vote. When we make changes to the calendar or changes to the curriculum, there are very clear faculty requirements for voting. When we, as a faculty, then there are other places in the CPR where they're considered advisory, but there isn't a vote. And in fact, there isn't a vote at the full budget committee. In the end, this set of proposals will come forward through Steve and through me to the president, who in the end will be making those ultimate decisions. So we work as a consultative team, and if you're effective as a team, you're going to work as hard as you possibly can within every single one of those committees to understand very, very deeply and thoughtfully what the pros and cons are on each side of every argument. But in the end, some of those decisions have to go back to a single place. But others are very clearly voting decisions, and so those will involve lots of people.
Question. I'm going to end.
Can you explain in a little more detail exactly what you will present to the Board of Trustees at the February meeting? In other words, we know the meeting will take place. A lot of study has gone on. Programs have been looked at. And of course, the Board of Trustees meeting as they do an executive session, is private. But nevertheless, can you give an outline of what you're going to ask them to debate and discuss? Because after that meeting, you will also announce to the community some of the changes, some of the decisions they came to. So I think it would be helpful if we knew what you have in mind at this point regarding the trustees meeting.
Yeah. So the four areas that we presented that we're looking at for both reductions in revenue, the board has asked us to take a very deep dive in many areas. Everything from our health benefits to layoffs, and they want us to quantify for them what magnitude of savings or revenue we expect from each of those areas. And that we're going to go and present all of this information to them, and then there are going to be some very difficult conversations and strategic decisions that will have to be made. They may say, that's okay, but go deeper. They may say, no, don't cut there because we want to really preserve that area. It's going to be it's a tremendous amount of work to prepare for this extremely brilliant and accomplished group of people to give them the kind of detail that they're going to want to be able to make really tough strategic decisions. So in all of those areas, we will have come up with numbers by then as to what we think we can get in each of those areas through making the strategic decisions that we think we need to make. Now, my experience with the board is that we have people who run some of the most successful companies in the world. So they have a lot of questions, and they usually have very interesting strategic input. So we're going in there with as detailed a plan as we can, but we are expecting that they're going to push back, that they're going to give guidance, that will then have us rethinking and reformulating what the final plan is going to be. Sure.
Very specifically, out of the November board meeting, the board charged President Kim to come back with what's the plan to resolve the gap in FY11 and FY12, the $50 million gap in FY11, and then adding the other 50 to the $100 million gap in FY12. And it was to show as much as you could the details of that, but is to be clear about what the combination of reductions would be in divisions in schools, what the cross-Dartmouth approach would be, and what the new revenue concepts were. And whenever we could, is to have very specific proposals that could be affected coming out of the February board meeting. And that's the wrestling that we're doing right now.
Also spending a lot of time thinking about the pros and cons of each decision, because every decision will have things that you're trying to weigh against each other. So that's part of our goal. The trustees want that information as well. I'm going to lump 4 in a very quick answer because they're very similar. They're related to similar things, and they're all related to exciting academic ideas that people put forward. So one is, why not double the graduate programs? They bring in lots of money. Are the ARRA funds, those are the federal funds, part of the stimulus package, creating new jobs at Dartmouth? Yes, they are. And in fact, I just answered that one kind of quickly. Research jobs throughout the institution, research jobs are ways that we bring people in to help in this research infrastructure of the institution. Some of them are local jobs, and some of them go through national searches. Again, it's a complicated mixture, but in my own lab, I've always had people that come from the Upper Valley together with some of them that come from out of the country. So they create a diverse and complex workforce. It talked about President Kim talking about creating new master's degree programs as a source of revenue, yet undergraduate programs don't create revenue. In fact, they cost $50,000 per student. What's the difference? The issue here is that we're getting lots of ideas about potential new graduate programs. That's, again, we're not going to make one of the things that we're not going to make a very quick decision about doing. I think we've had more than 40 different suggestions from people about potential new programs at Dartmouth. And if I kept a rough count, that might add 1,000 students to Dartmouth. And so you don't think about that one-on-one. That's, again, we want to sit back, work with the faculty about the programs that fit to the strategic plan of this institution. What do we want to be? Where do we see ourselves developing? And then we'll look at those plans in a different context. So the final one was, there was talk about increasing enrollment. Can we update you on that? And again, I'll say that we have been looking at that, trying to figure out how it would influence our academic programs in the arts and sciences. The professional school deans are also looking at that. It is both potentially an increase in revenue, but we want to make sure if we do things like this, we're being very thoughtful about it again, in that we are not making decisions just about revenue, we're making them about the quality and the strength of the program. So we're talking about that, but we aren't implementing any of those right now. That's something we'll have a broader conversation about.
So why don't we close with one question. What is your vision of Dartmouth 1 year from now and 3 years from now? So in 1 year from now, we would have basically finished the process of strategic budget reductions and investments. And we would have done all the things that we need to do to bring revenues in line bring expenses in line with revenue. And we will in 1 year be looking to the future. And in 3 years, where will we be? Well, I think that in 3 years, we can have established exciting new programs in the arts and humanities, in medical science. I think we're going to have programs that I hope anyway, admit students to Dartmouth College and allow them to start their careers either in business, engineering, or medicine, healthcare delivery, basic science early on. We are going to be the hottest school on the face of the planet. We have all the tools to do it. We are going to be a roiling, exciting place where intellectual debate happens in the most open, honest, and exciting way. The faculty members and professors from all over the world are going to want to come here to Hanover, Massachusetts. Sorry. The faculty from all over the world are going to want to come here to Hanover, New Hampshire, because this is going to be, and not because they might have a summer home in Norwich, Vermont, but they're going to want to come here because the debate and discussion here is going to be better than anywhere else. We are going to be a place that lives up to this notion that the world's troubles are our troubles. Sometimes, like with Haiti, we're going to have an opportunity to intervene directly, but for the most part, what we're going to do is we're going to debate those issues with such clarity from so many different perspectives that everybody will want to come here. And we will be graduating the most well-prepared young people that anyone has ever seen. People who can do critical analysis from many different perspectives. People who understand multiculturalism. People who are good writers, who are critical readers. People who've learned quantitative skills in a way that's prepared them to truly take on the world's troubles. Now, I know we're going to get there. I don't think we have to wait until we finish the budget process to lay the plans and put everything in place to get there. I think we're already having those discussions. But the world will come around and understand. We're not going to be number 11. If any of these ranking systems have any merit at all, we will be the number 1 undergraduate institution. Our business school will be recognized as one of the top in the world. Our medical school will go from ranked of 35 to one of the top in the world. Engineering school as well, and the graduate programs. The rankings don't matter. The rankings may or may not catch up with the reality of Dartmouth College. But what we can do here is limitless. Understand that we have all the elements here in Hanover to build the most exciting educational institution in the world. That is the goal that we all should have, and we should never be satisfied with anything less. I am so grateful for your attention. It's going to be a tough 6 months to a year. There's no question about it. It's a tough, first 6 months for me as well, but we'll get through this together. And even for the entire Upper Valley community. I mean, I've said it before, and I've been quoted as saying it, but we just have to hang together for the next 6 months to a year. If you get laid off, I'm so sorry that you have to go through that experience. But hang with us, because if the things that I know can happen, we hope that you will be back working with Dartmouth, maybe doing something different. But if we build the most exciting academic institution in the world, we're going to have plenty of jobs and plenty of excitement for everyone. So thank you all very much. Again, if there are rumors, tell us what they are. We'll tell you. We'll give you the answers. And we will have another conversation at some time after February. We don't quite know when yet. But the conversation will continue, and continue to give us your input through all the channels that are already open. Thank you very much.